Hi, everyone, and welcome to this edition of On Demand Training with New York and National Long Term Care Brokers. In this session, we'll talk about an important part of today's long term care planning landscape and the importance of keeping ourselves and our clients and prospects focused on what's most important. As is typically the case with our on demand training sessions, this session is intended for insurance agent or broker or financial advisor or planner use only and is not intended for use with the general public. Many of us have heard a number of the concerns you see on the screen recently when the discussion of long-term care planning and long-term care insurance in particular come up. While some of them may seem somewhat daunting, we hope to demonstrate to you that we can help your clients and prospects overcome many of those concerns. Ultimately, our goal is to ensure that you and your clients and prospects are not losing sight of what's most important in their planning, while at the same time recognizing that they may indeed have concerns that you need to address. Thus, the play on words in the session's title of not losing the forest for the trees. First, do we need to acknowledge that our clients and prospects have certain concerns and that those concerns may indeed be valid? We absolutely do. There is a saying that a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. That saying is true with consumers when it comes to long-term care planning and the role long-term care insurance, in whatever form might best fit their situations, plays in that planning. Unless and until we can properly address those concerns, consumers may still not have bought into the notion that, number one, they have a problem, and number two, that an insurance solution is right for them. With that said, we should also take heart in the knowledge that in many, even most instances, we can provide enough fact-based feedback to help consumers that will help them make informed decisions about their planning and perhaps overcome some of those concerns. In fact, we often find some concerns are based on inaccurate information and consumers don't even realize it. At the outset, we need to recognize that the long-term care planning market, as well as the long-term care insurance market in particular, have indeed changed. Most of us in the insurance and financial world are acutely aware of this. Traditional long-term care insurance has changed a great deal, for example, and newer, more innovative product solutions have come into the marketplace. One very important understanding that we all need to come to, however, is that as much as the product solution marketplace has changed, the one thing that has not changed and is not likely to change anytime soon is the need for proper planning. That is, as much as we may want to stick our heads in the sand because of, for example, changes in long-term care insurance pricing, underwriting, and the like, it's vital that we not ignore the need to plan simply because of those changes. With that as a backdrop for our discussion, let's take a look at some of the concerns we mentioned and consider some examples of ways to address those concerns. One concern that often comes up is that people don't buy long-term care insurance because, quote, it's too expensive, unquote. This one gets us into trouble at times, in part because we often presume we know what a client or prospect means when they express it. Some questions we might suggest you ask a consumer when they bring up this issue include, how do you mean? That question is open-ended and allows the consumer to elaborate on what they mean, often resulting in us more clearly understanding where they're coming from. It may also be good to ask the consumer, compared with what? What we mean is, sometimes when a consumer says it's too expensive, they're simply looking at whatever premium an insurance-based solution might carry and comparing it to the $0 that they're spending now. In other words, it's important that we discuss an insurance solution and its inherent value as opposed to simply its cost, as well as the cost, if you will, of not putting an insurance solution in place. Consumers will rarely, if ever, spend money on a cost item if they associate no value to it. They will, however, spend money on a solution that they perceive to bring value to them. Finally, it's important to communicate to consumers that we can indeed design an insurance solution that meets both their pocketbook and their need. Often consumers view long-term care insurance as, quote, too expensive because their next door neighbor's brother-in-law's cousin's cable TV installer told him his mother's long-term care insurance cost $10,000 a year. Conclusion, too expensive? Yup. Reality? Not so much, but it's up to us to prove it to them. Rate increases have been a big topic of discussion recently. However, it's important that we segment the discussion into two parts. Why have we seen rate increases on existing blocks of business? And the pricing of products being issued today and the likelihood that a policy issued today will have an increase, or if it does, will it have an increase as significant as some of those we've seen on in-force policies? The reality is that the discussion about an increase on an existing policy can be difficult, but the causes for those increases in most instances, namely the prolonged low interest rate environment and its impact on rates, as well as the much higher than expected persistency rates, or percentage of people hanging on to their long-term care insurance policy over the long run, are largely baked into the pricing cake of policies being issued now, if you will. While there's no guarantee, traditional long-term care insurance is, after all, by nature, a guaranteed renewable product. A leading actuarial organization released a pricing study for long-term care insurance in the fall of 2016 that indicated that, number one, they projected that there was about a 10% chance that a long-term care insurance policy issued in 2016 may have an in-force rate increase down the road. And number two, if there was an increase, they projected the average increase might be on the order of around 10%, a far cry from some of the percentage increases we've seen recently with some older in-force policies. That's important to point out to consumers because they may be under the understanding that, well, since we've seen sizable increases in long-term care insurance recently, it will always be the case. Not necessarily true, but it is, once again, up to us to educate consumers on that reality. When a consumer raises the concern of not, quote, getting anything back, unquote, if they don't ever use their long-term care benefits in an insurance-based solution, there are two main points we need to make. The first is that, at least with traditional long-term care insurance, it is just that, insurance. As such, and as is the case with our homeowners or auto insurance or liability or other insurances, they're designed to protect us from the impact of those risks, not give us something back if the protected risk doesn't occur. The second point, and one that may help allay some of the concern people might have who simply can't get comfortable with the notion of not getting anything back if the insurance is not used, is that there are now a number of insurance-based solutions that are available in the marketplace. Think of linked benefit life with long-term care rider solutions, for example, that can indeed offset that concern. The important thing to remember is that regardless of the concern they express, don't forget that our job is to find the right solution to fit their budget, their need, and their comfort level. A traditional long-term care insurance solution will provide the most comprehensive long-term care benefit per premium dollar, but we can also satisfy the concern about making sure that something comes back to them or their loved ones if they never use the long-term care benefits. We have also seen underwriting guidelines become a bit more restrictive over the years. That's part of the normal maturation process of any line of insurance. The more we know about claims, and in the case of long-term care insurance, the underlying causes for those claims, the more carefully we need to underwrite for them. The most important thing that you, as an agent or advisor, should keep in mind are that the need to pre-qualify your prospect by having a phone consult with our long-term care support and or underwriting team, or at least sending us a completed health pre-qualifying form before taking an application, is more vital than ever. Also, we should keep in mind that some products may provide a little more leeway in underwriting than others. While no insurance-based product can take all comers or be issued on a guaranteed basis, we will do everything we can to find a product solution if and when one is indeed available. Despite years of studies and statistics to the contrary, we still, amazingly, find that some people, consumers, or even other advisors may draw the conclusion that a consumer doesn't need to plan for a long-term care event. As we know, the statistics still show us that the likelihood and the potential impact of a long-term care event are far higher than with most other insurance-based risks. However, for some reason, some people will still try to tell your client or prospect that they don't need it. In the example of a CPA who tells a client this, we could certainly extend this to virtually any other advisor if you'd like, by the way. There are some important questions to ask. For example, is the CPA or the other advisor insurance licensed? If not, they may not properly understand insurance-based solutions and the impact they can have as much as you or I can. As important, we sometimes find that other professionals may tell clients that they don't need long-term care insurance, but when pressed, they have not put the recommendation in writing to that particular client. It's more of an off-the-cuff statement than a conclusion specific to that client. If a fellow professional is unwilling to put such a recommendation in writing, along with the rationale for that recommendation, it seems reasonable that we would ask, why not? I suspect, after all, you and I would have no issue with laying out our rationale for recommending a client put needed coverage in place. Why then would they have an issue? If they're not willing to put it in writing, perhaps it's more of a personal recommendation or opinion than a professional recommendation or opinion. And as a result, should we really place much credence in it? Finally, we may need to address the fact that there have been some insurance carriers who have left the long-term care insurance business, and that may cause concern for some clients or advisors. That's understandable. Well, many of the reasons we've seen rate increases on some existing blocks of long-term care insurance policies have been similar reasons that those carriers have cited for their decision to leave the long-term care insurance business. Those changes have made a marked impact on their profitability. It's also important to note that while some carriers have exited the business, we've actually seen a couple of carriers get into the long-term care insurance business in recent years. Those carriers sometimes cite the fact that they do not have the same effect of a legacy block of business, if you will, dragging on profitability, and as we've discussed, the pricing of policies today is more in line with where it should have been all along. It's equally important that we let consumers know that while a carrier may decide to no longer underwrite long-term care insurance business, they still have an obligation to make good on claims and servicing for existing long-term care insurance policies. In other words, the policies written don't go away. The company is just not writing new business anymore. As we wrap up, let's consider the words of Teddy Roosevelt, who once said, "In any moment of decision, the best thing you can do is the right thing, the next best thing is the wrong thing, and the worst thing you can do is nothing." Too many people find themselves paralyzed by some of the concerns we've outlined in this session. It's our job to make sure they logically deal with those concerns and make sure they have the right plans in place to protect themselves and their loved ones in the future. So remember, it's very tempting to lose sight of the forest for the trees. Don't fall into that trap, and you'll be a better advisor to your clients and your prospects. Thanks for tuning in today, and good selling.